Hear the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Half of my family are very big fans of Survivor. I don't know, do we have any Survivor fans here? I know you are. I love everyone's very shy about these reality TV shows. As they ask for fans, and there's a few. You didn't see a few hands kind of went up saying, "Don't tell anyone, but I'm a fan." I'm not a huge fan of Survivor, but I don't mind it. One of the things I enjoy watching, though, and I think is part of the appeal of it, is if you're not familiar with Survivor, like a lot of the reality TV shows, there's all this plotting and scheming that goes on as they all try and stay in the game. And the whole thing about Survivor is, what is it? Outwit, outplay, outlast, I think is the line. And so they're all trying to survive in the game and stay in. And they construct these amazing social plans, and they've got all these ideas. And then at the end of every episode, someone gets voted out. And there's this moment where you see someone inevitably has all of their plans that they thought were in place just come crashing down around them. It's come complete collapse. Because they've got cameras everywhere, they capture the looks on people's faces just in that moment of collapse when they realise, oh no, it's all gone horribly wrong. And I think that's part of the appeal of the show, is you can reassure yourself that it's okay to watch this train wreck because it's just television, but we kind of like watching this collapse of someone's grand plans. Or we despair when it's our favourite and we think, no, we thought it was going to work. It's all very well, though, in shows like Survivor to watch that, but we've probably all found ourselves at some point in the midst of something collapsing around us. And it's usually not a pleasant experience. And sometimes it's a little personal collapse, sometimes it's a bigger institutional collapse, sometimes it just seems like the whole world is collapsing around us. And in those moments we might ask God, where are you in this? What is your response to this? And that's what I want to explore this morning. The three Bible readings we just heard all kind of address the same question. We hear the story of Lazarus, and I can imagine his family as they mourn, questioning and at some point saying, where's the hope now for this? We've lost our beloved Lazarus. The psalmist cries out, where are you, Lord? And Ezekiel has an interesting vision. And it's Ezekiel's vision that I want to focus on this morning. So keep in mind the other two readings, but I'm not really going to talk about those. You'll see the connections as we go. But let me introduce you to Ezekiel the prophet. Ezekiel lived out his prophetic career amongst the community of exiled Judeans in Babylon. As a little bit of history, just so you get it, and don't worry if you don't follow all of the king's names. It's a messy history at this point in time. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. We've got a map, I think, actually, that for those that need a visual, that might help you a little bit. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem in about 606 BC during the reign of King Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim surrendered to him. And at that time, Nebuchadnezzar took some of the temple treasures, took some prisoners, including the prophet Daniel, another prophet, and went back to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar returned in about 597 BC, some years later. King Jehoiakim had died and was followed by Jehoiachin, who reigned for a total of 3 months. He was taken captive and taken to Babylon with the remainder of the temple treasures and other prisoners, among whom was Ezekiel. So Ezekiel has been taken from his home and taken into exile with others in Babylon. Now, while he was in exile, Nebuchadnezzar set up Zedekiah as a kind of puppet king who later rebelled, which led to a siege and the fall of Jerusalem about 18 months later. So at the opening of Ezekiel, the city of Jerusalem was still intact, the temple was still standing. By 586 BC, the Babylonians had returned to Jerusalem and destroyed the temple and the city. So Ezekiel's living in a time where he sees the collapse and ruin of everything around him, his home, his nation, his family, the temple, all gone. I was thinking, as I was reading through, I thought, imagine reading Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, as a Ukrainian right now. I would come home It would be a powerful sort of image. So Ezekiel knows about collapse and ruin. He's been at that place where he's lived it. He said everything is gone, everything's collapsed. And he probably asked the question, God, where are you? What is your answer? All hope seems lost. And in the midst of this collapse, God shows him a vision. In fact, God shows him a number of visions, but we get one of them today. It's a strange vision, a vision of this dry bones coming to life. But it's one that's found its way into popular culture. A few people at 8 o'clock, a few people afterwards were singing "Dem bones, dem dry bones," and that's one you might be familiar with. But also that image of dry bones coming to life. Think Pirates of the Caribbean. The whole premise of that is there. Think Aragorn leading the army of the dead in Lord of the Rings, if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings. Or there's even a character in Mario Kart called Dry Bones, who is a skeleton. So there we go. Mario Kart borrowed from Ezekiel. Bet you didn't know that. So what is this vision? Ezekiel sees a large expanse of valley, and this is Death Valley. This is really Death Valley. The floor of the valley is so dense with human bones that it's described as being full of bones. There are bones everywhere, scattered, mixed up. And Ezekiel sees them and is astounded by this sight. And we have to remember something, that these are not just dead bones. It's the remnants of dead people. It's not just the dead, but the dead and disgraced. Because in the thinking of, put yourself in the mind of an ancient Israelite or anywhere in the ancient Near East, an unburied corpse with exposed remains was a shocking disgrace to the dead. They've been denied proper burial. So what we're seeing here is not just the long dead, but the dead and disgraced. It's an image of just everything has gone wrong, everything has collapsed. It may be that this vision was prompted by an actual memory of Ezekiel seeing the Israelite dead strewn outside Jerusalem, scattered along the desert road as he was taken into exile. I imagine it would be an image that would hit home very closely for Ezekiel. And so he's confronted with this valley of bones, and God asks him a question: are these bones dead? He sort of clarifies, yes, they are, they're definitely dead. And then God asks Ezekiel a question which can only be described as a loaded question, which tends to be the sort of question God asks us. He says to Ezekiel, and it says here, he asks me, "Son of man, can these bones live?" Now Ezekiel's no fool. He can tell this is a loaded question. There's something going on here. And so he tries to dodge the question a little bit. You see his response? Only you can know the answer to that, God. Nice try, Ezekiel. So God says, well, Ezekiel, tell these bones to get up. So he does, and they do. What we get next, and you heard it in the reading, we get a blow-by-blow description of these scattered dry bones coming together. I love the way it describes it. It says, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. So we get halfway there. Now we've got not a valley of dry bones, but a valley of corpses. It's not much improvement. So then God says, all right, now you've got a bunch of corpses, fully fleshed but lifeless. Now God breathes into them. And what happens next? They come to life. It says, rising to their feet like a vast army. And that's kind of the end of the vision. This valley of dry bones is drawn together, fleshed out, and then breathed back to life. So what does it mean? Well, in case Ezekiel missed the point, God explains the meaning of the vision. And I'll read it directly. This is from verse 11 if you're following along. Then he said to me, "Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I'm going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I'll bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am Lord, when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. Years of exile in Babylon, Jerusalem in ruins, the temple destroyed. Can these bones live? This is God's response. I, the Lord, will put breath in you, and once again you will live. I will wrap you with muscles and skin and breathe life into you. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Can these bones live? The message this morning is one of simple reassurance. There's going to be no list at the end of, now this is what you should do, this is what we need to do, because this is God's response in those moments when we have nothing more to give, nothing else, where everything has collapsed around us, and we say, God, what now? And God responds, can these bones live? Yes, they can. Because it's a question most of us have asked one time or another. It's those moments of failure that seem irredeemable. It's in the midst of a relationship breakdown that seems to have little hope of reconciliation. It's in the face of our crumbling institutions, failing political and social structures, or simply in those moments of weariness when we feel like we have nothing more to give. Can these bones come back to life? Is there any hope for our society? Is there any hope for our environments? Is there any hope for this situation I'm in? Is there any hope for this relationship? Is there any hope for me? Can these dry bones live? What's God's answer to us when all seems lost and we cry out, what hope is there now? And God answers, just as he answered Ezekiel. Hold on to that answer for a moment. Let me introduce you to someone else. Let me introduce you to Randall Champion. We've got a picture of three guys. There we go. Randall's the one in the bed. Randall Champion, you may have heard of him. You may even be familiar with his story, although you might not recognise it from this picture. On the 17th of July 1967, electrical linesman Randall Champion almost lost his life. While performing routine maintenance on power lines in Jacksonville, Florida, Champion accidentally came into contact with a low-voltage line at the top of the pole. Thrown back unconscious, he hung upside down, his safety harness preventing him from falling any further. His good friend and co-worker, J.D. Thompson, who's the guy at the back, rushed to Champion's aid, and while unable to administer CPR, he was able to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation until Champion began to breathe again. Thompson then unclipped his friend and carried him over his shoulder to the ground, where they continued to work on him. Champion was moderately revived by the time paramedics arrived, eventually making a full recovery, and he lived another 35 years, dying in 2002 at the age of 64. Now, this remarkable story, this remarkable moment was captured in a stunning image by photographer Rocco Morabito, who is the other guy in the photo. And that is the photo that he took. Beautiful. So we'll just leave that up there for a while. The photo, named The Kiss of Life, won the 1968 Pulitzer Prize for Spot News Photography. The way it came about, Morabito, the photographer, was in the area on an unrelated assignment when he looked up and saw Champion dangling from the pole. The first thing he did was call an ambulance. And then he grabbed his camera and started taking photos. And the resulting image, this one particularly, is a powerful one. Here's how one journalist describes it. There's an eerie elegance to the photo. Two men in midair posed like dancers. One hangs upside down with his arms over his head. The other cradles him and presses their faces together. The so-called Kiss of Life photo resonates because of its unsettling beauty. It presents a dramatic and life-saving rescue high on a utility pole, where life literally hangs in the balance between two men's leather safety straps. It's an amazing photo, an amazing image. When you hear the story behind it, just even more incredible. But for me, this photo does something more. For me, this photo is an image of Easter. Because in this image, I'm reminded of a God who took human form only to end up hanging lifeless on a wooden pole. And yet at the same time, I see him restored by the breath of life. In that moment, God becomes both sacrifice and saviour. Imagine the journalist describing not that photo, but the moment of Jesus on the cross. I'll read the description again and just think about it. There's an eerie elegance to the image. Men in midair posed like dancers. One hangs with his arms over his head, the other cradles him and presses their faces together. The photo resonates because of its unsettling beauty. It presents a dramatic and life-saving rescue high on a utility pole where life literally hangs in the balance. Can these bones live? God answers this question for Ezekiel and for us in the same way that J.D. Thompson responded to the sight of his friend Randall's lifeless body hanging on the straps, with life-giving breath. In Ezekiel's vision, God animates dry bones with his breath as a picture of reassurance that the people of Israel, taken captive, displaced from their homeland, would be restored to new life. My spirit will give you breath and you will live again. I promise you home. I will bring you home and you will know that I have kept my promise. I, the Lord, have spoken. On the cross and in his resurrection, Jesus promises to breathe new life into each of us. So the words of encouragement today are not a list of things to do, but a simple cry. In those moments of despair when all seems lost and we cannot see a way forward, God promises his breath. My spirit will give you breath and you will live again. I will bring you home and you will know that I have kept my promise. And it's not some abstract impersonal promise, but the heartfelt promise of one who sees a friend in dire need and rushes to respond. It's a God who sacrificed himself to save humankind. So next time it feels like you're hanging by the safety harness with nothing more to give, don't lose hope, but ask instead for God's breath to revive and restore you. The same God who himself hung from a pole and breathed his last, only to rise again 3 days later. It's a beautiful image and a beautiful prayer, asking for God's breath. I've always resonated with the lyrics of a song by a Christian rock band, Newsboys. They've been around for a while. It's not really an original. They've taken words to a number of hymns that draw on this same idea. But I want to leave us with the words of just the simple words of the chorus as a prayer for each of us individually, particularly in those moments where everything feels like it's collapsing around us. A prayer for our church, a prayer for the young people that we've heard Oscar talking about, who struggle, a prayer for our society, a prayer for our nation, a prayer for our world. It's a very simple one, and I'll finish with it. Breathe on me, breathe, O breath of God. Breathe on me till my heart is new. Breathe on me, breathe, O breath of life. Breathe on me till I love like you do. May you know God's reviving breath.